Yeah, so if we, look at, what's currently being claimed. So right now, based on a 2006 study called Livestock's Long Shadow, they calculated that cattle emit 18% of worldwide greenhouse gases. Now, they corrected that number down to 14.5 because of a guy named Frank Mitloehner, who's out of UC Davis, and he said, hey, look, you're doing a life cycle assessment. You're not measuring direct emissions, and so they correct that number down. But the true number is 5%. So 5% of worldwide emissions are coming from livestock in general, cattle making up about 60% of that. They didn't, and they said 14% comes from the transportation industry and 14% come from cows. The transportation industry, they didn't do life cycle emission. They just looked at the tailpipe. So if they would compare tailpipe emissions from a car versus burps from a cow, it would be 14% for the car, 5% for the cows. But since they didn't do that, it's an apples to oranges comparison. Now, the other thing that's important about that is the 14% is a worldwide global number. And so I live in the United States, you live in the UK. In the United States, cows are responsible for 2% of our greenhouse gas emissions because we have so much other emissions. Now, if you're in Botswana, right, cows are producing a lot because there's nothing else there. There's nothing to compete with. So using worldwide numbers to dictate policy in the UK and the United States, this doesn't make sense. If every single person in the United States went vegan and we got rid of all the cows, we slaughtered all the cows and all the chickens and all the pigs and all the sheep and all the cats and dogs, the worldwide difference in greenhouse gas emissions would be less than 1%. That's every single American giving that up. So is it worth it? Clearly not. And what would the negative impacts be? Nutrient deficiencies for many people. You would have to consume more calories, so we would have to produce more calories. More monocropping, which is degradative to the land, so it's destroying the soil. So it's not a solution. Veganism, worldwide veganism, will never work.
You just mentioned something else, though. Global veganism is never going to be tenable. It's never going to be practical by any means.
It can't take off in large scale anywhere. We need the animals for agriculture in general. Where the farming would collapse completely if you took the animals out of the equation.
Because of fertilizer, they're all part of that whole
right.
ecosystem.
Right.
So it's not a possibility. It's not practical. And the vegans agree with this too?
No, of course they don't.
They
They have some different outlooks, obviously. I think the ethical argument, I'm going to eat a guiltless salad because no animal death occurred. That is a big fallacy, because when you look at the way all food is raised, animals are killed. Now, people say, well, it's incidental because the crop machine ran over the harvester and most of them run away. That's a part of where the death is coming from. But you think about it, almost all these crops are sprayed with pesticides. They're sprayed with rodenticides. They're sprayed with insecticides. So those things are done intentionally. I mean, a pesticide, the name tells you what it's going to do, like homicide. Pesticide. We're killing pests. We know we're doing it. They do it intentionally. Literally trillions of small animals and insects are killed to produce all this food. And if they're not killed with pesticides, farmers are out there, they pay people to shoot these animals. They shoot any animal that's eating the food, they get shot. Or they blow them up. If they have little moles in the hole, they drop bombs on there and blow these animals up. So there are trillions of animals killed for you to be able to eat your vegan salad. So and guess what? Those animals don't have a quick slaughter. They don't have a quick death. They have a slow, painless death of poison, bleeding to death, laying in a field rotting. This is what they do. That's the suffering you don't see, that there's not a movie about. So it's not like, this argument that if we stop feeding cows, grain, that all these humans would have all this food. Most of what they eat, most of what the cows eat is inedible to humans. If you go to a livestock feeding area and pick up what they're eating, there's no way you'd eat that. It's not fit for human consumption.
Okay. So they're not eating food that people would be eating. They're eating food that only those animals would be eating.
Only about 10% of what they eat, humans can conceivably eat. So it's a very small percentage. So if you don't like harming animals, you just have to stop living. There's nothing going to get around that. And just, like I said, every meal you consume comes with a lot of animal death. That's just the sad reality of this. And whether you see it on your plate or you don't, it's still there. Now you can pretend it's not there, have your guiltless smoothie or something like, or think you are, but it's not really happening. In fact, there was a study out of Australia looking at wheat production versus beef production. And they saw for every kilogram of beef, for the number of animals killed for a kilogram of beef, there are 25 times as many animals killed for a kilogram of wheat. And that usually comes in the form of things like mice and other things. So what's more important, one cow's life or 25 mice? Yeah. And so it's who makes that decision. It's completely arbitrary. Well, I mean, they talk about health, and they think that the vegan argument is going to protect you from cancer and protect you from heart disease. Interesting, look at the epic Oxford study, which actually looked at this. The number one killer of vegans is heart disease. The number two killer of vegans is cancer. So you do all that sort of vegan nonsense, you still die of heart disease and cancer anyway.
I guess the last vegan point was the cult of veganism. So you get into the club. It's a bit like crypto, which I've been into as well, where you end up like, I'm just into crypto and like nothing else, your rationality drops down to zero. But in the veganism club, like you're in, but it's like Hotel California, you can never leave.
Yeah.
And yeah, talk about that. I mean, it does become something.
Well, and this is interesting, Brian. I still do, about an hour a day I do consultations. I do lifestyle consultations. And every single week, without fail, I get 2 or 3 ex-vegans that, and some of them have been doing it for 20, 30 years. After a period of time, it catches up to them and they get sick. They have mental health issues. They have digestive issues. They have autoimmune issues. They just don't feel good. And that's a common thing. I think the lucky ones get sick early and they realize that, hey, this isn't good for me. Some of them, they get sucked into the cult. They get brainwashed, and they can't leave. And they everything but their diet is causing problems. And so they're constantly fasting and detoxing and doing cleanses and adding supplements, and just they can't believe the diet is the problem for them. But more often than not, it is.